for joining us. Right now with Girl Up, we'll be doing a Girl Talk webinar talking about techniques for effective storytelling. So with me here today, I have Mr. Justin Snow. He is a speechwriter and communication strategist. He has a diverse background in executive communication, speechwriting, and journalism, and he currently serves as director of executive communications for the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization. Since 2015, he has led the overall executive communication strategy for both HRC President Chad Griffin and HRC President Alfonso David, drafting hundreds of speeches for political, corporate, and international audiences. Prior to joining HRC, Justin served as political editor and White House correspondent for Metro Weekly, where he covered national politics as well as the US Supreme Court. A graduate of the University of Maryland, he got his start covering the Maryland General Assembly in Annapolis. His writing has appeared in USA Today, CNN, NBC News, The Hill, Politico Magazine, Baltimore Magazine, New York Post, The American Prospect, The Advocate, The Baltimore, and more. He is an avid reader, movie buff, and a natural park enthusiast. So without further ado, here is Justin Snow. And I'll kick it off by just asking the first question to kind of start us off. How did you first discover your passion for storytelling and get an interest in writing?
Thanks, Leena, and thanks to Girl Up for having me. For me, writing was something that I was always interested in when I was, a kid. When I was growing up, I was lucky to be surrounded by books and by parents and family members who really encouraged reading. So I developed a passion for reading at a very young age, and that kind of led to an interest in writing as well. For a long time, journalism was what I was really interested in. I was really interested in persuasive writing, op-ed writing, that sort of thing. When I was in high school, I had one of my first internships, first of several that I had throughout high school and college, interning with the editorial page of the Baltimore Examiner, my hometown newspaper. And I had kind of like a front row seat for how a newspaper is put out every day, how the editors work with one another, how the editorial page editor kind of comments on the news and the separation between the news division and the opinion department. And it was also an opportunity for me to kind of start honing my skills as a writer. So I started writing, during that internship. When I went into college, worked on the student newspaper, had a number of journalism internships that way, and kind of was able to find a way to actually make a career out of writing. And to write about things I care about, to develop skills as a reporter. I did a number of opinion pieces, but then I started doing real sort of news reporting. That's what I did out of college. Yet that interest for me in persuasive writing always kind of remained. So when an opportunity presented itself to transition from journalism to speech writing, it was different, but in a lot of ways it was very similar. It was something that required me to gather facts. It was something that required me to persuade an audience to accept a certain position that perhaps they didn't walk in having that position to begin with. So it's something that really kind of spoke to my skill set and my interests, and I'm lucky enough to do something that I get to write for a living, and that's something I feel very fortunate to do.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing, and I know you've written a lot about human rights topics and advocacy topics, and I really resonated with how you talked about reading was really the first catapult that really got you into writing, because I was the same way. When I was little, I would always like to read nonfiction, which is kind of interesting. Usually when we're young, we like to read fiction, but I really found an interest in reading about human rights topics and what people were doing around the world to kind of remedy those topics. And so once I was doing a lot of reading on that, I decided that I would like to write my own and kind of influence that same space. So I think it's really cool um, how you had that similar experience with reading and how you're able to take that passion for writing and turn it into a career. So now I'd like to ask you to share with our audience, what do you think are some of the most important tips and tricks that you have for writing, to if someone's just starting out, or they'd like to write but they're not sure how to, what do you recommend?
So I think that you just mentioned it, and that's reading. Like reading is so key. If you want to write, you have to read. And even if you don't have to read books about how to be a writer, how to be a better writer. I mean, you can read those things, but I think just reading anything, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, or the newspaper or magazines, it makes you such a better writer. You learn words and you see how other writers, hone their craft. And over time, you just kind of internalize all that, and it makes you so much better. I mean, that would be my number one tip to anyone that wants to be a better writer is just to read more. If you want to get into kind of the more strategic ways of when you're approaching a project, kind of depends on your style. For me, I'm not someone who always loves to use an outline, but I do try to kind of have a general idea of when I'm approaching, whether it's an op-ed or a speech, of what the goal of the piece is, who the audience is going to be, kind of what our main points are throughout, what the theme of the piece is going to be. And then I kind of gather the evidence and the facts that are going to support whatever I'm writing about. The other thing I would say is write first and edit later. When you're in the middle of writing, don't get too hung up on, is this sentence perfect and could this be better? Just keep going, especially when you really hit your stride. And like, I'm sure that you felt this way before, when you're writing something and you really feel like you've got it and you just keep going. And then you go back and you edit things and you perfect things and you polish it and make it really good. But in the moment, the editing can come later. Just write and don't get hung up on if you think that word was the right choice, or if that sentence doesn't quite work. You can always come back to it. The other thing I would say, which I think is super helpful, not just if you're writing speeches, but when I'm writing a speech, I'm writing for the ear. So nobody can go back and reread words that have been spoken. So you really have to write in a way that people can follow along, and you don't lose them. And sentences are shorter in a speech. It's a little less complicated than if you're writing an op-ed, where you can, you have some space for some creativity, where people, if they don't pick it up the first time, they can go back and reread it. However, when I'm writing a speech, especially during the editing process, I always read it out loud as I'm editing. And I think when you read out loud, whether it's a speech or something that people are going to read, you pick up on things that might be a little clunky or don't sound quite right. It's a lot easier to find things that could be improved when you read it out loud and hear it yourself. If I'm reading something in my head, I'm going to hear it the way that I intended to write it, but it might not actually be what's on the page. So that's, I think, another really important part, for the editing process as you're writing. And the other thing I would say is just, have fun with it. Don't beat yourself up over it. Writing is one of those things that you just get better the more you practice, and that's really the only way to get better is just to do it, and to keep doing it and to keep practicing and learning from it.
Yeah. I think like the saying goes, practice makes perfect. And
Yep.
I think it's interesting. I have a professor who would always tell us, write fast and then edit very slowly, which kind of echoes what you were talking about, because it's really important, especially when you have like that first idea or the first couple of ideas when you're starting to sit down and write. The most important thing is to get down those general ideas, whether it be in bullet points or however it may be. It doesn't have to be perfect grammar, but as long as you have those core ideas, you can go and then slowly edit and slowly perfect it and polish it. So yeah, I think those are all very, very good pieces of advice that I think the girls that are watching this will enjoy. And the last question I had was, Girl Up often emphasizes storytelling in writing and making sure that we're not just giving statistics or numbers, but we're actually telling a story, because often advocacy that's paired with storytelling is the most powerful. And I know you've done a lot of storytelling in your work that you've written for many publications. So what tips do you have for girls in order to incorporate storytelling with their writing?
I think that that's absolutely right. Stories are how you change hearts and minds. Whether it's advocacy work or human rights work, whatever the case might be, it's all about people. And it doesn't matter if you're, reading a nonfiction book, about something that happened in history, or if you're reading, a novel. It's still, people are at the center of it, and their stories are at the center of it. And I think that if you can help people, if you're trying to persuade people to care about a cause, or something that you care about, if you can help them see themselves in what you're writing about, what you care about, they will be much more inclined to see your point of view, and perhaps to share your point of view. So I think that if you can find stories that resonate with people, that move people, it makes everything else much easier to accomplish. And luckily, what's good about that is most people are very willing to share their story with you. I learned that as a journalist, that if you express an interest in things that people care about, they'll be happy to talk to you about the things that they care about. Our discussion right here is kind of a case in point of that. You and I both care about writing, and that's why we're here talking about it. So I think if you reach out to people and you express an interest in their story, and you use those stories in your work, that can be very effective at persuading people. And at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have stories to share, and that can be a real resource.
Yeah, yeah, and I especially like storytelling because it puts. I typically write about refugee rights and the refugee crisis, and often when we talk about issues, whether it be the refugee crisis or any human rights issue or any even gender equality issue that we're talking about, people often cite numbers and statistics and kind of dehumanize the experience that people have, and people kind of lose touch with okay, but how does this situation, or how do these numbers make actual people feel? So I think that's the beautiful thing about storytelling is, as long as you can put together what someone is telling you and what their experience is, it really has the power to change people's opinions and to bring awareness to certain topics. So I definitely agree. And thank you very much. I think that concludes our session here, our webinar. I hope all of you guys watching really enjoyed. I want to thank you, Justin, again for joining us. It's been really amazing to have you speak, and I've really enjoyed all the advice you've given us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leena.